Good afternoon, ma'am. Your voice is not audible, ma'am.
Hello. Good afternoon. Ma'am, good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, dear students.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Shall I start, ma'am?
Yes, Vijaya. Please go ahead, Vijaya.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah. Good afternoon, students. I think 27 members have joined. I think 20, maybe 25. Okay. So this 2 days, we are going to deal with the third block. And today, 2 units first and the later part, that is 9th unit tomorrow. Okay. So please don't use blackboard, sorry, whiteboard. The scratches are appearing. Okay. So let's start with our block. So this block, we are going to deal with the language and culture. So we have finished communication, language and communication. Today, we are going to learn few things about language and culture. So first of all, we know language. Let's just have one single definition about language, which is a little bit different from the earlier class. So in this class, there is a relationship between language and culture. And what kind of relationship is there between language and culture? Okay. So how language changes the culture and how culture affects language. So both are interdependent and you cannot separate these two entities, language and culture. Both go hand in hand. That means you cannot divide them. So language is a system of speech, manual or written symbols. This is language. You try to remember the definition. Only if you are speaking, that is not language. That is not only language. Language can be written form. That means if you write, that is you are communicating. The other persons can read. That is also a language. And we are talking. This is oral. That is a speech. That is also language. And manual. That is gestures, verbal, non-verbal communication also. If you want to stop somebody, if you show your hand, you are giving a gesture, a sign. That is also language. Okay. So language is a system of speech, manual or written symbols that humans use to communicate. Already we have learned this definition. So this is language. It enables us to communicate, interpret, and play. Language helps us to share with others and identify ourselves. So just try to understand the last line. So why is language helpful? So language helps us to have an
Prepare for exam, Telugu.
Identify ourselves. What is our role? Which kind of culture, which kind of society that we are living in? that is language. So it enables us to live in a group as a member, as an individual, as a social member. Okay, so language is not just a private thing, or it is not completely a social activity. It is both. It is both at personal level and as well as at social level. So language is a system of culture. Now we will learn about culture. So in Telugu, because so many members are there from Telugu background, I use a Telugu word for culture, that is a Samskruti. Culture means in Telugu, Samskruti. And there is a difference between culture and civilization. Civilization is different, not entirely different. So civilization is a broader area where culture is also embedded. I mean, if you add culture, then it will become civilization. Okay, so here we are talking about just culture. It is not that human, humans' achievements, like scientific achievements, biological, technology, sciences, how civilized we are, okay, our social organization, all these. But we are not talking about all those. Even though we are talking about a little bit, that also gives us a representation in the culture. So here we are dealing with the relationship between language and culture. A group of people's characteristics and patterns of behavior define their culture. So what are our cultural characteristics? Language, arts, and customs are the basic categories we use to characterize culture. So what do you say? Suppose you take Indus Valley civilization. We are not talking about civilization, but culture. So what was their art? What was their language? What kind of language they used? Whether they have used spoken or written, or what was their music, arts, anything. What they use, how they used religion. Even religion also comes under culture. So based on all these, we define a particular group of culture. And remember, there are many cultures. You cannot say, for example, Indian, you can say Indian civilization, but you cannot say culture. Culture in India is the same, one and the same. No. For example, in Andhra, we have a different culture. In Telangana, different culture. See, language is different, dialects are different, but still culture is also different. Their beliefs are different. So beliefs are also a part of culture. So there may be many cultures. So this is called multiculturalism, or culture existing within the groups, between the groups. This is also, you can say, so that means there is, you cannot say a broader group, a big group can consist only a same culture. So try to understand culture and language. So language, based on the language, you cannot completely define culture. Language is also culture, and culture changes among the groups and throughout the time also to some extent. Culture on either side is much more than that. Culture teaches us how to think, communicate with others, and perceive our surroundings. This is your cultural perspective. Obviously, you go to any Muslim house, okay, they'll hug each other, right? And they say some word addressing people, okay. And if you go to Christian families, they greet people in a different way. If you go to Hindu people, they do some other way. This is a cultural variation based on the religion. And if you go to village, it's not there is no task of religion. Even though you go to any village, they will greet you with some other kind of a treatment. And if you go to any urban house, the receiving of people, hospitality, everything is different. So it changes. So how culture teaches us how we should behave, how we should modify, okay, how we should learn. So we elders teach youngsters or kids how to behave, how to greet people, how to address people, how to respect people, and what are the moral values that we have to learn, what kind of language that we have to use. Okay, all these things we observe. So culture comes from the Latin word colere, which means to produce something out of the earth. That is the literal meaning of the word culture. So whatever which is produced out of the earth comes under culture. That means the way we eat, the food we eat, okay, the architecture we use, and the decoration, home decoration, and the celebrations, okay, arts, music, dance, and whatever you use, everything comes under culture. So culture is often used to identify or separate people into groups. Obviously, you go somewhere, okay, out of our country, and if we are encountering some other people, obviously you'll be find out, oh, okay, so you are not part of this place, because everything is new. Whatever they follow, what the way of dressing, the way of language, everything. Even though we are speaking English, even though you are communicating in English language, but our way of behavior, our way of understanding is quite different from the native speakers of English language. Because what is that? What makes the difference? It is culture. So the way they understand is not same as the way we understand, because the language has its own nativity. It is not just enough to learn language, a grammatical structure, vocabulary, all these things. Even though you may very good at speaking of English language, structure, grammar, vocabulary, everything. But that doesn't give that completeness unless and until you try to understand the culture of that native language, the culture of that native language where it has emerged. Okay, so however, much like language, everybody has their own distinct culture, even though two people living in similar situations will share characteristics. However, they are unable to share the same cultural experiences or ideas. So what exactly culture encompasses? So let us see very few areas here, that is language, music, art, architecture, beliefs, cuisines, the way we cook, okay, social habits, taboos, religion. Okay, so these things come under culture. Based on these things, we define a group's culture. That group can be anything. You can say work culture. So what kind of work culture you can distinguish? For example, a doctor's work culture is quite different from a teacher's work culture. Or maybe a software's work culture is entirely different from another social entrepreneur or a social activist work culture, isn't it? So obviously, this culture is not just related or restricted to religion, but it encompasses all these things. Based on these, you define culture of that particular work. Please don't use whiteboard, please. Language and culture are related. No doubt that language and culture are related. Language changes often represent a culture's changing values. So as long as culture is changing, obviously language also changes. Language and culture are inextricably related. Inextricably means you cannot separate. They are not two separate entities. They are one and the same. That is inextricably. That means they are interrelated, interdependent. Okay, so language changes. If a culture changes, language also changes. Okay, and if language changes, culture changes. If culture changes, language changes. Both are interdependent. For example, you take now, everybody knows Facebook these days. But if you go to 2000 year, the 2000 and the beginning of this century, so nobody knows what is internet, and even we don't know what is internet, what are mobile phones and all that. But today, if you go to any remote part of the village also, the extreme ends of the globe also, everybody knows what is internet, what is Facebook, what is Twitter, what is WhatsApp and all that. Today we know what is smartphone even. Everybody is having a smartphone. So language changed and culture also changed, obviously. So there may be many reasons. For example, take the example of COVID-19. Today, if any functions or celebrations are happening, we are not going to their homes and we are not inviting them directly. What we are doing, we are just sending some invitations through WhatsApp. This is a new culture. And the language changed. Language also changed, isn't it? The way medium is changed. Medium is changed and the language pattern is also changed. So this language changes culture and culture language changes this, what do you say, culture also. So language is related to all features of human life in society, and comprehension of the surrounding culture is key to learning a language. So what is the successful key to learn a language is to observe, to comprehend, to try to understand and follow and imitate the basic native languages surroundings. Unless and until you don't try, you cannot learn completely a language. So this is a basic thing. Suppose if you have to learn Telugu, so you cannot learn Telugu living in America unless and until you knew the culture, how they behave, what word that symbolizes, and all these. And suppose if you go to any other North Indian, okay, North Indian people, if you try to observe, I'm not commenting anybody, don't take it personal. So they ask us, what is your good name? Okay, may I know your good name, please? And a native speaker may not understand what is this good name, because they use what is your name. But why we are adding good? That is a translation of our mother tongue. Okay, so the Hindi, in Hindi you say aapki shubh naam kya hai? That is a respectable way of understanding. Okay, but the native speakers of English, they don't understand what is this good name. So this is a cultural variation. So this type of language cannot be understood if it is taken out of the surrounding of that emergence of language. So the language is also allows for the development and evolution of cultural values. So language also allows, because this language also changes, isn't it? So it is allowing us to invite the changes, to invite the development, and to accept the development. So this is called evolution. Evolution is a gradual development, gradual change. It is not a sudden change or a sudden thing which is happening. It is evolution, evolving, okay, which is emerging, which is changing day by day, a regular kind of development. Okay, the language allows for the development and evolution of cultural values also. So these are the definitions which are given in your note textbook also. So just to go through the textbook and try to read it. It is very clear. Okay, and come with the doubts if you have got any doubt, because this is just don't go through the text as it is. Okay, don't try to understand the terms mechanically. You just try to relate them. Imagine the situations. Okay, imagine the gradual development of the humanity and how the culture changed and all that. I'll give you just one simple example. So once upon a time, the people, I mean our primitive man generation, okay, our forefathers, a primitive man doesn't know how to cook, so they used to eat raw food, animals and whatever. Okay, so then maybe they did not have the terms like a cuisine, okay, cooking, and what are this salt, pepper, and all this vocabulary in the language also. But later, man started cooking food. That is burning or putting the meat on fire, or else cooking rice and all this. Okay, so rather than raw food, man what is that? He knew and that he acknowledged and he understood that if you cook the food, then it is best for you. Maybe digestion, for health and all that. So he started cooking. And whenever you start cooking, you use all the terms, isn't it? You use the terms which are related with all the kitchen. And you cook, you fire, you dry, whatever dry thing, whatever the liquids, vegetables, and all these things will come into the vocabulary and they will come into use. So here the language is allowing the changes in the culture. So that is how every language has developed gradually, day by day, day by day. So a piece of culture is also lost. If you, so he says that this person says, Ken Hale says that a piece of culture is also lost as culture has a strong influence on the language. So if a culture is extincted, that means if there is no existence of culture, a language which belongs to that particular culture is also lost. Because there is no culture, the language is not unable to survive. Is unable to survive. Why? Because that language is a part of culture and it embodies and it encompasses so many different things. So if there is no language, there is no culture, language also extincts. So it become, there are many endangered languages in the world now. So this is because this is the result of cultural loss. Cultural loss, it is a term. What do you mean by cultural loss? It is a loss of a culture of particular group. Okay, so language promotes social connections. It is an important point. Language promotes social connections, obviously. At the same time, culture aids our learning of how to connect with others. So without language, we cannot communicate, no doubt. So by using this language, we are communicating and we are promoting connections, communication. And culture enables us. Aids means help. Culture aids us our learning of how to connect with others. Suppose you go to a school, how you greet to your teacher, it is different. You go to a hospital, how you talk to a doctor, how you talk to your friend, how you talk to your parents, your elders, or how you talk to your enemies, right? We use different types of words, vocabulary, statements, expressions, language, vocabulary, all these things changes. So how you have to behave, it teaches us, culture teaches us norms. That means the rules, how you have to behave in order to imbibe all these values, which suits, which modifies yourself, which modifies your language, behavior, attitude, thinking, everything in accordance with the benefit of the society. This is culture. Language is both the source and the essence of a culture. Language is both the source. Through the language, you understand a culture. Through the language is just, I repeat, it is not just a spoken form. Everything you use, written, spoken, signs, symbols, everything. So it is the source. Suppose now we are studying our ancestors' language, that their pictographical representation. In the first class, we have seen how they used to draw, how they used to, the sculpture and all that. They used to draw some little pictures and all that. So that is a language encoded. Now we are able to read, even though there is no script. That means no sounds, only signs and symbols are there, but still we are able to read. So obviously, language is both the source and the essence of a culture. Okay, so these two are interdependent and we cannot separate these two. That is the relation, briefly, that is the relationship between these two. So what is the difficulty in the notion of culture? Some disciplines culture. Discipline means, it is in your textbook, it is given discipline. Discipline is a study of a particular one. For example, you say anthropology, okay, biology, physics, chemistry, English, all these are different disciplines. Okay, disciplines is a study of a particular subject. So some disciplines define culture as being cultured, savage to barbaric and to civilized. Some people, some discipline, that means suppose you say anthropology, you say sociology. Okay, so their point of view is different. So some say that anything is culture. Anything is culture. Anything is a culture in the sense, suppose you use some good things. Okay, you celebrate one thing. For example, some sect of people, they celebrate birthdays of newly born people, newly born kids, some infants, and some other sect of people, they don't celebrate. They think celebrating a birth is dangerous, or it is a what is it is prohibited for them. Okay, so but you cannot say that the people who are celebrating the birthdays are good and the people who are not celebrating birthdays are not good, bad. They're bad. You cannot say. That means everything has its own importance, its own significance, its own dependence, isn't it? So you cannot judge them. So there is a differences of opinion between the studies of how you define culture. So some say that it is the development of humans. Savage is basic. They don't have any homes. People who used to live on trees and caves, savage to barbaric. They have learned some things, that is to cover their bodies, to have food and all that. They distinguished themselves from the animals. And civilized is we. We are civilized. So cultured. The word cultured means it also here taking the civilization into consideration. Okay, civilization into consideration. So they are defining these people are cultured. But in some studies says that it is not. If tribes have their own culture, the urban people have their own culture. You cannot degrade anything. Both are same. Both are existing. Both of them have their own importance, and they are adding to their essence to our historical perspective. Another point of view is that there is no value judgment to it. That means just now we talked there is no you cannot give a value judgment. There are many cultures or multicultures present in a society. So there are many cultures, a particular group of culture, and there is a group of people who deviate from their parental groups, and they follow different kind of attitude, different kind of this cultures. So a culture within a culture also exists. There are different cultures, there are multicultures, all this is. Sometimes culture is equated with language or individuality and identity. So sometimes how you define culture is different. That means based on the language, you define culture, or based on individual attitude, behavior, characteristic, you define culture. And sometimes based on the identity, you define their culture. Right? So for example, you take Rajputs. Oh, Rajputs is known for their bravery. Okay, even though they are not doing any wars, you still imagine that, you consider that there are that kind of values which are present still today. And now if we are saying this statement, so what are you doing? You are defining the culture of that identity. Based on identity, you are defining individuality at the level and with the language also. Some people have very good developed language, group. And some people, even they don't use that much of expressions, grammatical structure, vocabulary. All these are not maybe well developed, but still that is also a language. And if you are defining that language, you may you are ignoring all the other aspects, and based on the language only you are defining. So sometimes culture is also equated based on the availability or the circumstances. So different approaches to culture. So anthropologists look at culture as synonyms with the language. So that is equal with the language. Culture is a language, and language is culture. This is the opinion of anthropologists. And they consider language as a tool to study culture. So they take language as a tool. That means based on the language, how they are using language, what type of signals and symbols they are using, that is their culture. This is the definition of anthropologists. And sociologists look at culture as a synonymous with civilization. And for these people, civilization is important. How well developed you are, what are the things that you are using for the propagation of the society, human welfare, that is civilization. For example, once this yellow fever and all these things were, for example, you take plague. Due to plague, many people died, but there was no vaccination or medicine which was available. Simply, people were let to die. So that society was not civilized. But now, if any pandemic is there, we are trying to find the medicine, vaccine, or what are the things that precautions we can take care. So based on this, we can say ours is a civilized society. So sociologists look at culture as a civilization. So society grows and develops so as to its culture develops and evolves. So society grows as the civilization grows. So the culture also develops. Psychology emphasizes the learning aspect of culture and places emphasis on the individual rather than society. If you take the study of psychology, how they feel culture, culture for psychologist or the psychology student is that it is the learning aspect of culture. Okay, and places emphasis on individual, just only individual. You take every individual, you analyze their attitude, their behavior and everything, then you decide this is culture. That is individual level is important for a psychologist, and they deal this study of culture starting from individual rather than society. So for psychologists, culture changes. Within the group also culture changes because they are taking each and every individual. So there are two categories of culture: achievement culture and behavioral culture. What is achievement? This is called material and non-material. Achievement is what you can see, you can perceive, you can observe. That is achievement culture. And behavior cultural is how you behave. That is called non-material culture. Here are some examples. Material, non-material culture. That is achievement and behavioral. So, physical components of culture. These consist of objects, artifacts, clothing, tools, pictures, homes, gadgets, whatever you have. Any scientific development, any biological development, any technological development. All these things come under this material culture. For example, now we are using AC. Okay. But once upon a time, there was no AC. We are having so many things today. Laptops and all this. Anything. So if any gadget is coming to in our life, human life, obviously it is going to change everything. At least half part of aspect of our life will change. So the change, there is a change in the culture also. So this is material culture. What are the things that you can consider? All these things are material, and non-material things is subjective or abstract. Abstract, where there is no definite form. Culture, that is religion. Religion is there is no particular standard form. That is religion. Perceptions, ideas, okay, attitudes, how you behave. For example, today, even today also, if you cook rice in an electrical cooker, okay, but the elder people, they don't eat. Okay, even you cook this one roti on the flame of a gas burner or something, they don't eat. They think that is different. Okay, they will give some problem to digestive system, and so they don't eat. They want to only earthen pot. They want to only some other traditional way of cooking. This is a perception. So this is a non-material culture. So if you take this perception as an example, our generation is quite different from the older generation, our forefathers, and so the culture also changed. So attitudes, beliefs, and values. Elements of culture. So these already we have discussed emphasis. This is a material culture. These are all the elements of culture: language, spoken and unspoken. Aesthetics. Aesthetics is artifacts, painting, okay, and music, all this comes under aesthetics. Education, any development which comes under education. Religion, the moral sect and spiritual sect of religion. Attitudes and values, what are the values that you follow. Social organization, what is our social organization, which sector has been given importance. Okay. So that's why we have Marxism, we have communist theories, we have democratic theories, all these things, isn't it? So all these are social organization, how well organized the societies are. We have different value systems, beliefs and norms. Example, polygamy, drinking wine, marriages, marrying cousins, etc. So we have different value systems. Everything has their own. You go to North Indians, and marrying a maternal uncle. In Telugu, we say mama, menamama. We marry. It is a social practice for us. But whereas it is almost a sin for North Indians. They cannot even digest how you can marry a father-like person. So there is a difference between our value system. This is belief. There is nothing in it. And whereas some people marry the cousins, but we don't marry cousins, brothers, we don't marry brothers, but some people. So this is a difference of opinions, different of practices based on their circumstances. And use of polygamy. Polygamy, having many number of partners, marrying partners through marriage. This is poly. Poly means many. Poly means many. Mono means a single. Monogamy, having one wife or having one husband, is monogamy. Polygamy, having many number of wives at a single time, or else having many husbands at a single time. That is polygamy. So in some societies, polygamy is a good practice. It is a reputed practice. But now, but in our society, polygamy is not accepted. It is something which we cannot even imagine. So there is a difference between value systems, beliefs and norms. Drinking wine. In Telangana, drinking wine is not, it is not a taboo or something. Even women also drink. But in our society, if you go to any other area or maybe any other culture of Andhra, or you go to any place, drinking wine, only men will drink, and that too, it is not socially enjoyable or reputed practice. Marriages also, how you marry, whom you marry, what is the practice, you are giving some money or not, or what else, what type of life you are practicing after marriage or before marriage. This is so all these are some types of practices which you will take them into consideration while you are defining culture. So cultural relativism is ethnocentrism. So ethnocentrism is characterized by the attitude that one's own group believes culture and customs are superior. So I'll tell you just one sentence about this ethnocentrism is that one person thinking that my culture, my religion and my attitude, my social practice is the best, and trying to finding problems and faults with some other culture. So self-centered, you will give importance to your culture, your belief, your practice, your attitude. That is ethnocentrism. So this type of people, they don't have the idea or exposure. This may be maybe their attitude, or maybe due to lack of exposure to other cultures, but thinking that their own culture is good. That is the idea of ethnocentrism. It is quite opposite with cultural relativism. That means you try to relate your culture with other cultures. You compare and you don't even feel bad about it. Cultural relativism is a view that all beliefs, customs, and ethics are relative to the individual within his or her own social context. For example, you take Bengalis. Okay, so the people who are non-vegetarian, sorry, who are vegetarians, okay, who are vegetarians in Bengal, okay, they eat fish. But whereas the rest of the areas, You take fish as a what is it? Vegetarian or non-vegetarian? It is non-vegetarian, isn't it? We consider eating fish as a non-vegetarian food, but there they don't eat any other type of meat or flesh of any animal, but still they accept fish as a pure vegetarian. They eat fish, and they also call that a jalpush. So there was a historical background. What is that? So once upon a time, a famine occurred, and there was nothing available, and they completely drowned in water, and only fish was the only available material for their cooking and food. So they catch fish, and they used to catch fish, and they used to cook, and they used to eat that.
Which community is it, ma'am?
I don't know exactly. It is community. Here, don't think about the community. All people ate that. All people who were there in that situation, both non-vegetarian and vegetarian. Okay. And if I can say only that I'm a particular group of upper caste Brahmins also, but you cannot point like that. We cannot do that. Okay. Just try to understand the situation that there were based on their social context, situations, okay, circumstances, and the historical events, culture also develops. It is a culture also, food habits. For example, we use curry leaves in our food as a regular part, whereas North Indians, they don't use, because based on the environment, climatic conditions, food habits also developed. So that is also a part of culture. Whereas instead of this, they may use some other thing, but they don't use this. And whatever they use, we don't use those ingredients in our cooking. So this is a type of changes which occurred and which gradually develops, and this is cultural relativism. So in other words, right and wrong are culture specific. Okay, you cannot say that doing that is a right. You cannot say that, and that is a wrong, because that is a cultural specific word. In some communities, okay, whenever a husband dies, immediately the widow will be married, given in marriage to the deceased person's brother. But here we don't have that practice. So how can you do that? This is wrong. We cannot say that statement. It is cultural specific. You cannot simply decide. You cannot say judge right or wrong. This is the notion of cultural relativism. Counterculture. Counterculture means whose values and norms or behavior differ substantially from those of the mainstream. So it is a deviation. It is a little bit of deviation. That is counterculture. They belong to that culture. They belong to that group, but still their ideas, their values, and their practices would be different. So they don't deviate. They don't separate themselves as a separate identity, but they practice something other. That is a counterculture. For example, these Bengali Muslims, they're Muslims. They are stick to their religion, okay, and yet they practice putting the vermilion on the forehead. You know, vermilion, manam bottu, married people bottu pettukuntam kada, mangalyam ani ikkada sindhuram, adi mang bharna antaru Hindi lo, but they practice even though they are Muslims. Actually, Muslims, they don't use vermilion. So this is, they don't deviate, except that the remaining practices are same. Practicing religion, tradition, everything is same, but they practice it. This is cultural diffusion. So the throughout the times, when the time changes, culture also accepts some changes. The term cultural change, it is also sociologist views is that society is changed. The society takes on new cultural traits, behavioral patterns, and social norms, and create new social structure as a result. So it is not that something you can say. Okay, for example, globalization. Today, our culture changed. Once upon a time, we used to cook whatever the things which are available for us, only traditional food. But if you go today, There is nothing like that, right? You go, you can find our traditional food. You go and you can find out all these junk food also. This has become a part of our culture. So people started enjoying weekends. Earlier it was not there. We changed our culture, right? And marriages also changed. And the big, what is that? Lifestyle changed. Economical practices changed. Saving policies changed. Ideas changed. Society changed. Life changed. Food habits changed. Eating habits changed. Times has been changed due to these corporate jobs sector. And everything changed. This is a cultural change. So cultural diffusion. Globalization is a cultural diffusion as well as cultural change. So cultural diffusion, that is some practices will slowly diffuse into some other culture. Some cultural practices are taking place in some other culture. This is cultural diffusion. So language, example is language. Everybody are using English language today. Example, take globalization. See these drinks, all these cool drinks. These are not our Indian cold drinks, but now we have companies here. This is a cultural diffusion, and everybody are using English language. Of course, English was official language once upon a time, but now also, if you go to any remote area, also people who doesn't know how to read and write, also they are talking English. They are speaking in English. They say what's up, that, and this everything. They say cool drink, Pepsi, cola, vocabulary they are using. So they are using another foreign language. This is a cultural diffusion. We are wearing jeans. It was not our traditional dress. But now you go anything, anywhere throughout the world, jeans has become a common norm, common practice. That is cultural diffusion. So here it is a slide about globalization. Already we discussed. So people, goods and services and money all flow more easily across international borders. So if language is crossing, going to another, obviously culture is also going. If language and culture are going, obviously they will take place with a new twist in our culture. That is a cultural change as well as cultural diffusion. We don't lose our own, but yet we accept some changes. We modify something. So the culture changes, develops. And in the next unit, you have a relationship between language and culture. So what is the relationship between language and culture? We have already discussed. So culture defines language and the language shapes culture. Remember the statement. If culture defines the language and language shapes culture. Language is a symbol of cultural and personal identity. Language is a symbol of cultural and personal identity. So you take an example. Suppose our mother ma'am is speaking. You observe her language, how polished it is. So it depends on her learning, education, and obviously her profession. Even though you take any other native who can speak English very well, you can, and who is not a teacher or maybe not a professional, decent professional, you cannot expect such type of respectable vocabulary and the way of dressing and addressing people, talking and all that. So here, language is a symbol of cultural and personal identity. Americans use a slang. They use the slang. Okay, they can speak whatever they want. There is no limitation for obscenity words, very among the people. But whereas you take a UK language, but they don't use. So this is a cultural difference based on the language. Based on the language, you can define, you can identify personally as well as socially. So cultural groups have different worldviews based on their own cultures, shared experiences. So cultural groups have their own different worldly views. That means how you perceive the world, how an Indian perceive the development or the world. So for us, if you go to anything, whatever, okay. So if you don't have a phone, what do you think? Immediately you have to buy a phone. What do you do? Even though you don't have money, you take a loan and you buy it immediately, whether you are necessary, hardly necessary the thing or not. Again here, It is that you can identify a student going, a middle class family is a student going and buying an iPhone, even though parents are unable to afford it. So how it is explained? It is a cultural impact. Okay, so it is an economically also, you cannot, so that means you are borrowing money from any bank and you are using. It is affecting the social level. It is economic in the family, at the level of family, at the level of economy. All these things are how you perceive the world. Okay, and even you take some other person or maybe some other, America or maybe another country, up to 13 years, parents will take off everything of the children. After that, they will be left alone. That they have to do some other work, part-time job, and all that. And so, so such type of situations, that person who is working as a part-time waiter, waitress, whatever it is, part-time job, they may be unable to. They cannot afford an iPhone. Whereas in Indian society, child can, parents is buying that phone. So this is how you perceive the world. So this is our culture. Parents nurture, patronize their children, and in some communities it is not happening. So this is also another idea that relationship between language and culture you have to find out. Remember, language is the medium through which individuals transmit culture from generation to another generation. Obviously, through language we are preserving language, preserving our culture. We are passing it on from generations to generations. Another idea is language is a collector of culture. Language is a collector. Collector is you collect everything. Okay, so how it is how you are able to collect the entire culture? So language is both part of culture as well as the medium by which culture is defined and described, as well as a collector. Stories, fairy tales, legends, humor, jokes, sayings, proverbs, and idioms collect and preserve culture, the wisdom of nations, their customs, and the ways of life. Okay, so you are literature students. You should remember this point very much. Okay, you should remember. You should understand this. So if you are going to read Beowulf, we have never seen, we have never heard about Beowulf, but you have to read it. And while you are reading that, for example, take Shakespeare. We never seen a Shakespeare. He doesn't belong to our culture, but now they have preserved. He has preserved the societal circumstances. Whatever he has come to know, that he has provided everything in that information in the form of stories, poems, and all that. So stories, and again, what is the basis? Language. All these things. What is this language? Either you speak, you write, or you use symbols. You are preserving culture. You are collecting culture in the form of language, or using language as a medium. So Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So this is a hypothesis formed by this Sapir-Whorf, and here you can understand is that one idea, one basic idea, that is language dictates how we think. The vocabulary and grammar structure of language determines the way we view the world. So language, he says that to some extent, that language is controlling your mind. What word that you have to use, what idea that, okay. For example, if you have to address a person, we have all the relations on earth. We have separate name, Babai, Pidney, okay, and Mama, Atta, right? And in English, you take English, uncle. There is a single word to relate either maternal brother or paternal brother. Okay, so that is either you are referring to brother of your mother or brother of your father, is both same for their culture. But here we have different names. That means the language you are using is dictating how you think, how you act, okay, how you behave, what you eat, how you relate with the society, yourself with the society. So this is his idea. So he said two types of two paid principles That is a linguistic determinism. The language we use to some extent determines the way in which we view and think about the world around us. So the language we use is determining our behavior. That is a linguistic determinism. And the second one is linguistic relativity. Linguistic relativity, cultural relativity, this is the same, that people who speak different languages perceive and think about the world quite differently from one another. So here, that is a Hopi conceptions of time, English Mandarin. So let me, will have a word about this Hopi conception. So this Hopi language speakers, they cannot talk about past, okay, and future. That means we can break the time into past, present, future, obviously. But this
Okay.
type of language, okay, so they cannot break the time. We can break. We think our idea is it is in the past, isn't it? It has happened already. It is now. It is continuing, and we are talking about future also. But these people, it is a cycle, continuous cycle. So time is a continuous cycle. You cannot break that. And for example, another one is English and Mandarin. This is vertical and horizontal type of representation is practiced. So Mandarin, they say past, above, and future, below. So they talk about something like that. For example, you take grammar section. Okay, while you are teaching and learning sentences, you draw a line and you say this is past, this is present, and this is the present continuous. You use some arrows and straight lines and to represent time. Whereas Mandarins, they use a vertical line, that is a straight line, vertical line, and they say past is above. On the top of the line, they say past, and below they say future, and in the middle, that is present for them. It is a different time of representation. Aymara. So this is another example. So past is before us, as we can see what has happened. Future is back, we cannot see. Okay, so obviously based on the idea, language also changes. For example, if I say I will see, that means I am going to see. I'm going to see. You're talking about future. I didn't see. You're talking about past. But these people, whenever they are imagining, they consider that they can see past because it has already happened, and future is unknown for them. So they put future backwards. That means based on this idea, the structure, sentence, vocabulary, everything changes. So these are the differences. So examples are just like we have discussed. And one more thing is given is here. For example, it is based on the importance also, idea. Okay. For example, a flower was is broken. Okay, it is broken. And how an English person address? He says, John broke the vase. If you say John broke the vase, who's that? Who is at default? Who is at fault? Who is at guilt? John. So they are emphasizing the person rather than the incident. So what is important for them? It is not breaking of vase important for them, but the person who broke it is important for them. That means this John should be punished. So this is a cultural application. So for there is a mistake, for there is a guilt, for there is any problem, so there should be a punishment. So based on that, we frame sentences. John broke the vase. Immediately child is reporting, John broke the vase. So there is no other option for them except punishment. And a Spanish or Japanese speaker would say the vase broke. The vase broke. There is no information of the person who has broken the vase. The vase broke. So nobody can do it. So what is that? So they'll be thinking of the substitution. So what next comes? What we have to do? So either the money is paid or the penalty can be paid, or whatever it is. They may have their own options. So it is also, you have to identify here what tone, what intention makes you to speak language. So this intention, this tone, this idea, okay, the way it represents the cultural background, the practices, social practices of that particular culture. An eye for an eye for an eye. If you do that, if you harm to anybody, you should be harmed definitely. And there is a if a secondary thing is there, yeah. So there should be some less punishment, and you have to change the attitude rather than being punished. So this idea makes the language also changes. Okay, so it changes the language, the tone, and all that. And Russians have more words for the color blue. They can easily distinguish the shades rather than other languages speaks. See, for human eye, all colors are same. We can see and observe and enjoy many colors. But if you have that term in usage of our culture, we can immediately identify. And for some cultures, blue is blue. Whatever the shade, it is blue. And if some culture, they have many varieties. In Russians, for example, here it is saying Russian. So they have so many words: light blue, pale blue, sky blue, whatever, dark blue, royal blue, any blue. So many blues are there. But they can express. So if you have these many words, the type of mentality, the type of thing, they also will evolve. Their ideas, thoughts will take some evolvement, some kind of development. So they will be specific in ideas. So whenever they will grow, they have some specific ideas. For example, English people use, they say, we use right, left, take left. Okay, we use these directions. But they say north and south, take north. If the directions are given, southeast, northeast. So they think that spatial knowledge will be developed. If you're talking about directions, obviously you can think of the planes. So your spatial knowledge will develop. Knowledge are also are of 7 types: numerical knowledge, spatial knowledge, such type of things are there. That's a different topic. So it clearly says that they have better spatial knowledge based on their language when compared to us. So this is how language plays an important role, and how language determines our idea. Okay. Okay, then it's time up, I think. We will continue this few, just 7 slides are there.
Okay, ma'am. Then continue.
Yeah. Tomorrow we will have 9th unit as well as the remaining part of this lesson, right?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, madam. Okay, madam.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.